Jamal was a 14-year-old boy with a big heart. He lived in a small house with his grandmother in a quiet but struggling neighborhood. Life wasn't easy there, but Jamal always found a way to stay cheerful. Everyone knew him for his helpful nature. If someone needed groceries, Jamal would run to the store. If an old neighbor needed help with their bags, Jamal was there. One sunny afternoon, Jamal was walking home after running an errand for his grandmother. He liked walking along the cracked sidewalks of his neighborhood, listening to the birds and imagining what life was like beyond the tall buildings of the city. As he passed the corner near the old park, Jamal heard a loud noise, a car horn blaring and tires screeching. He turned his head and saw a shiny black car stopped in the middle of the street. Smoke was coming from the hood, and the driver looked panicked. Jamal's first thought was, "That car does not belong here." The driver, Robert, stepped out. He was wearing an expensive suit, but his face was pale and his hands were shaking. "Excuse me," Robert called out, his voice trembling. "Can you help me? My wife is in labor." Jamal ran closer and saw a woman in the car. She looked like she was in pain, holding her stomach and breathing heavily. Jamal realized how serious the situation was. "Sir, the hospital is far from here," Jamal said, trying to stay calm. "Your car won't make it like this, but I know a place nearby where they can help." Robert hesitated. "Are you sure?" "Yes, trust me," Jamal replied firmly. He opened the car door and helped the woman, Emma, out. "Ma'am, I'll make sure you're okay," he said softly. Emma nodded weakly, trusting the boy's calm voice. "Follow me," Jamal said. He started leading them down the street. His mind raced. The small clinic was a few blocks away, but they didn't have much time. He needed to act fast. As they walked, Jamal noticed Emma struggling. She leaned on her husband, who looked helpless and unsure. Jamal grabbed an old cart from the sidewalk. "Ma'am, you can sit here. It'll make it easier," he said. Robert gave Jamal a surprised look. "Thank you. You're really helping us," he said, his voice filled with gratitude. They moved as quickly as they could. The streets were noisy, and some people stopped to stare, but Jamal kept going. His focus was on helping Emma, nothing else. When they finally reached the clinic, Jamal ran ahead to call for help. The staff looked surprised at first, but when they saw Emma, they quickly brought a stretcher. As they wheeled Emma inside, Robert turned to Jamal. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you," he said, his voice cracking. Jamal shook his head. "It's okay. I just wanted to help." Standing outside the clinic, Jamal felt a small sense of relief. But deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of something much bigger. Inside the small clinic, the air was filled with urgency. Nurses rushed around, and doctors quickly prepared to help Emma. Jamal stood near the door, watching as the staff worked. He didn't know much about hospitals, but he could see the worry in Robert's eyes. "Is she going to be okay?" Robert asked one of the nurses. "She's in good hands," the nurse assured him before hurrying back. Robert sat down in the waiting area, his head in his hands. Jamal could feel the tension in the room, but he wasn't the type to sit still when something needed to be done. He walked over to Robert and gently tapped his shoulder. "Sir, is there anyone you want me to call?" "Family? Friends?" Jamal asked. Robert looked up, surprised. "No, it's just us. We were on our way back from a trip. I didn't expect this to happen so suddenly." Jamal nodded. "Okay, I'll stay here with you until we know she's okay." Robert gave him a weak smile. "Thank you. You're a good kid." Jamal wasn't used to hearing compliments from strangers, so he just shrugged and sat down nearby. His mind wandered back to the moments leading up to this. If he hadn't been there, what would have happened? The thought made him feel both proud and a little scared. Suddenly, the door to the clinic opened, and a nurse rushed out. Her face looked serious. "We need a doctor, but we don't have enough staff right now," she said aloud, looking around. Jamal's heart sank. He knew the situation was bad, and every second counted. He thought quickly, remembering someone who could help. "Miss Louise," Jamal exclaimed, standing up. "Who?" Robert asked, confused. "Miss Louise is a retired midwife who lives just down the street. She used to help deliver babies before she retired," Jamal explained. "She can help." Without waiting for permission, Jamal ran out of the clinic and sprinted through the streets. His lungs burned as he pushed himself to go faster. He couldn't let Emma down, not after coming this far. When he reached Miss Louise's house, he banged on the door, panting. "Miss Louise, it's Jamal. We need your help," he shouted. After a moment, the door opened and an elderly woman with kind eyes peeked out. "Jamal, what's going on, child?" Jamal quickly explained the situation. Miss Louise's face turned serious, and without hesitation, she grabbed her medical bag. "Lead the way," she said firmly. The two hurried back to the clinic, where Robert was pacing nervously. When he saw them, his face lit up with hope. "This is Miss Louise," Jamal introduced her. "She can help." Miss Louise didn't waste any time. She spoke with the staff and stepped into the room where Emma was. The door closed behind her, leaving Jamal and Robert to wait once again. Robert looked at Jamal, his voice trembling. "You didn't have to do all this, but you did. Why?" Jamal shrugged. "Because it was the right thing to do." For the first time, Robert felt a sense of admiration for the boy. He realized Jamal wasn't just helping. He was saving lives. The waiting room felt heavy with tension. Robert paced back and forth, glancing at the clock on the wall every few seconds. His expensive suit was now wrinkled, and his usually calm demeanor was nowhere to be seen. Jamal sat quietly, his hands clasped together. He didn't know much about medical emergencies, but he knew one thing. They had done everything they could. Now it was up to Miss Louise and the clinic staff to help Emma and her unborn baby. "I hope she's okay," Robert murmured, almost to himself. "She will be," Jamal said confidently. "Miss Louise knows what she's doing. She's helped a lot of people in our neighborhood." Robert stopped pacing and looked at Jamal. "You seem so calm. How do you stay so hopeful in a moment like this?" Jamal thought for a moment. "My grandma always says, worry doesn't fix anything, but doing the right thing does. So I just try to focus on what I can do to help." Robert was quiet for a moment, taking in the wisdom from someone much younger than himself. Suddenly, the door to the emergency room opened, and Miss Louise stepped out. She looked tired but had a small smile on her face. "Everything's fine," she announced. "The baby is healthy, and Emma is resting now." Robert let out a deep sigh of relief, his eyes filling with tears. "Thank you. Thank you so much," he said, his voice shaking. "You should thank this young man," Miss Louise said, gesturing to Jamal. "If it weren't for him, I wouldn't even be here to help." Robert turned to Jamal, overwhelmed with emotion. "I don't even know how to thank you. You saved my wife and my child. I owe you everything." Jamal looked down, feeling a little embarrassed. "I just did what anyone would do," he said softly. But Robert shook his head. "No, Jamal, not everyone would do what you did. Most people would have ignored us or walked away. You went out of your way to help complete strangers. That's something special." Miss Louise patted Jamal on the shoulder. "You've got a good heart, young man. Never lose that." Jamal smiled shyly. He wasn't used to all this attention, but it felt good to know he had made a difference. A nurse came out and told Robert he could see Emma and the baby now. Robert turned to Jamal and said, "Come with me. I want you to meet them." Jamal hesitated. "Are you sure? This is a family moment." "You're part of this now," Robert insisted. "You're the reason they're safe." Jamal followed Robert into the room. Emma was lying in the hospital bed, holding a tiny baby wrapped in a soft blanket. Her face lit up when she saw them. "Is this the boy who helped us?" Emma asked, her voice warm and grateful. Robert nodded. "This is Jamal. He's our hero." Emma reached out and gently squeezed Jamal's hand. "Thank you, Jamal. You saved our family." Jamal felt a warmth in his chest he couldn't quite explain. For the first time, he realized that his actions had truly changed someone's life. The next few hours felt like a blur. After everything that had happened, Jamal found himself standing outside the clinic, the warm evening air feeling different. He was still trying to process everything. How he had helped save Emma's life, and how Robert had looked at him with such deep gratitude. Robert was pacing again, but this time his steps were slower and more thoughtful. He walked over to Jamal, his face serious. "Jamal, I need to talk to you," Robert said. Jamal looked up at him, surprised. "What about, sir?" Robert sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know how to explain this, but I feel like you've changed everything for me. You saved my wife. You saved my son. I can't even begin to thank you enough." Jamal was unsure of what to say. He wasn't used to receiving thanks, especially from someone like Robert, who seemed so powerful and important. But it was clear that Robert was struggling with how to repay him. "You don't need to thank me," Jamal said, his voice soft but firm. "I just did what needed to be done. Anybody would have done the same thing." Robert shook his head. "Not everybody, Jamal. You didn't just help us because it was the right thing to do. You acted quickly. You cared for my wife when I couldn't even think straight. Most people would have walked away, but not you." Jamal lowered his gaze, feeling the weight of Robert's words. "I know I'm just a kid from a small neighborhood, but I promise I'm not asking for much," Jamal continued. "I don't want anything fancy or expensive. Just a chance for people here to have better lives." Robert paused. His mind was racing as he thought about everything Jamal had done for them. He was starting to realize how much the boy's simple request meant. "What exactly do you mean?" Robert asked, still unsure. Jamal's voice grew more serious. "Well, there's a community center nearby that closed down years ago. It was where people went for help, classes, support, anything they needed. But it's been abandoned for so long. I think if it could reopen, people could have a place to learn, get food, and be together. I just want it to be better here for everyone." Robert's heart ached as he listened to Jamal. He realized how much the boy cared about his neighborhood, how he wasn't asking for anything personal, but instead wanted to give others what they deserved. "You want to rebuild the community center?" Robert asked quietly. "Yeah," Jamal said, "and maybe start a scholarship fund for kids, so they can go to college, get a good education, and have better chances in life." Robert stood there for a moment, unsure of what to say. He had a lot of money, a lot of power, but he'd never thought to use it like this. He'd always focused on his own success. But Jamal's words made him realize how much could be done with that wealth, if only he used it for something bigger than himself. "All right," Robert finally said, his voice full of determination. "I'll do it. I'll help rebuild the community center, and I'll fund those scholarships. You've shown me what truly matters, Jamal." Jamal's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really? You'll do that?" "Really," Robert confirmed with a nod. "You've earned it." Jamal smiled. It wasn't a huge, flashy smile, but it was real. And in that moment, he knew that things were about to change for the better, not just for him, but for the entire community. The next day, Robert was eager to keep his promise. He wanted to learn more about the community Jamal had grown up in, and Jamal agreed to show him around. Robert knew he couldn't fully understand what Jamal had been through unless he saw it for himself. Jamal led Robert through the streets of the neighborhood, pointing out places that meant a lot to him. The old community center, now closed and falling apart, was their first stop. "This is where everything started," Jamal explained. "It used to be a place where people came to talk, to learn, and to get help. But then, the funding ran out, and they shut it down. A lot of people still need it, though." Robert looked at the building with a frown. The windows were broken, and the front door had rust on it. It was hard to imagine it ever being a place of hope, but Jamal's words painted a different picture. They don't have much here, Jamal continued. Most of the kids don't even have a place to study or play. Some of the parents are working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. Robert could feel the weight of Jamal's words. He'd always lived in a big house with everything he needed. He never thought about how hard life could be for others. But now, seeing the conditions around him, he started to understand. As they walked down the street, Jamal pointed out different areas. There was the old park, which was just a large empty space now, the playground equipment rusted and broken. Jamal showed Robert the small grocery store that had barely enough food to stock the shelves, and the rundown school where the kids struggled with outdated textbooks and overcrowded classrooms. "This is where we live," Jamal said quietly, his voice soft but steady. "This is what we have. But it's not enough." Robert stopped walking for a moment. His eyes scanned the neighborhood, taking in everything Jamal had shown him. He thought about his own life, the luxury cars, the big house, the expensive vacations, things that had never truly brought him happiness. He'd always focused on making more money, but now he realized that money alone didn't mean much if it didn't help anyone else. "This is hard to see," Robert admitted, his voice thick with emotion. "But it's also something I need to see. It's the truth." Jamal looked at him. "This is why I want the community center back. It's not just a building. It's a place where people can come together, where we can all have a chance to get better. People can learn skills, get jobs, and take care of their families." Robert nodded slowly. "I understand now. I think I've been living in a bubble for too long, not realizing what other people go through. But after seeing all of this, I want to help." Jamal smiled. He didn't expect Robert to fully understand right away, but hearing him say that made him feel hopeful. Maybe, just maybe, things could really change. "Thank you, Mr. Robert," Jamal said, his voice full of sincerity. "It means a lot that you want to help." Robert placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "No, thank you, Jamal. You've opened my eyes to something I never even thought about. I'll make sure we do everything we can." For the first time, Jamal felt a deep sense of hope. He wasn't just dreaming of a better future, he was making it happen. As the days passed, Robert became more and more involved in Jamal's community. He met with local leaders, visited the schools, and spoke to families who lived in the neighborhood. The more he saw, the more determined he became to help. One afternoon, Robert invited Jamal to his office. It was a tall building with glass walls that overlooked the city. Robert's office was filled with books, papers, and expensive artwork, but today he wasn't focused on any of that. He was focused on the future. "Jamal," Robert began, looking at him seriously, "I've been thinking a lot about everything you've shown me. The community center, the schools, the people. I've seen how much the people here need help, and I want to make a real difference." Jamal listened closely, not sure what Robert was about to say. "I've already started working on the plans for the community center," Robert continued. "We'll rebuild it from the ground up, making sure it's a place where people can come to learn, find jobs, and get support. But I want to do more. I want to make sure kids here don't just dream of a better future, but that they have the chance to reach it." Jamal's heart raced. He hadn't expected Robert to move so quickly, but here he was, already planning to help make his dreams a reality. "I want to set up a scholarship program for local kids," Robert said, his eyes meeting Jamal's. "I want to make sure that the children in this community have the chance to go to college and get a good education. I'll provide the funding for the scholarships, and I'll work with local schools to make sure the students have all the support they need." Jamal couldn't believe what he was hearing. He had always dreamed of a better life, but hearing Robert speak about the scholarships made it feel real. For the first time, Jamal believed that his community could have the chance to grow, to learn, and to thrive. "I don't know what to say," Jamal stammered, his voice filled with awe. "This is amazing. Thank you." Robert smiled. You don't have to thank me. You're the one who made this happen. You asked for a chance for others, and now we're going to make sure that happens. You're leading this change, Jamal. You're showing me what really matters." Jamal felt a lump form in his throat. He had always hoped for something better, but now it was starting to feel like a dream that could come true. "But that's not all," Robert added, leaning forward. "I want you to be a part of this. You've done so much already, and I want you to help me make sure everything goes right. You'll be involved in planning, in making decisions, and in guiding the project. You'll be a leader in your own community." Jamal's eyes widened. "You mean I can help lead all of this? Like, be part of making it happen?" "Exactly," Robert said with a nod. "You know your community better than anyone else. I believe you're the right person to help guide this change. This is your chance to make a lasting impact." Jamal felt a rush of emotions. He had never imagined that he would be able to do something this big, this important. But now, with Robert's help, he saw that it was possible. "I won't let you down, Mr. Robert," Jamal said, his voice filled with determination. "You don't need to worry about that," Robert replied. "You've already proven that you're more than capable." As Jamal left the office that day, he felt like he was walking on air. The dream he had always held in his heart was no longer just a dream. It was becoming a reality. And now, he had the chance to help lead his community into a brighter future. The plans for the community center moved forward quickly. Robert and Jamal met often, discussing how to make the dream a reality. Robert didn't waste any time. He hired architects and contractors, and together with Jamal, they came up with a design for the new center that would provide everything the community needed: learning spaces, job training, a health clinic, and a safe place for kids to play. At first, Jamal couldn't believe how fast things were moving. One day, he stood with Robert at the construction site, watching workers lay the foundation for the new community center. It was a far cry from the rundown building that had stood there before. "I can't believe this is really happening," Jamal said, his voice filled with wonder. Robert smiled. "Believe it, this is just the beginning." Over the next few weeks, Robert and Jamal worked together to build more than just a physical space. They set up programs that would teach local kids valuable skills like coding, art, and music. They worked on connecting with local businesses to offer job training and internships. They even made plans for a daycare center, so parents who worked multiple jobs could have a safe place for their young children. Jamal was involved in every part of the process. He helped design the programs, spoke to community members about their needs, and worked with the teachers and volunteers who would make the center a success. Robert trusted him completely, and Jamal began to see himself in a new light. He wasn't just a boy from the neighborhood anymore. He was a leader. One evening, after a long day of planning, Robert and Jamal sat in the office, going over the final details. "Do you think people will come?" Jamal asked, a hint of doubt in his voice. "I mean, it's been so long since the center was open, and some people might not trust it." Robert looked at him thoughtfully. "It's normal to have doubts at first, Jamal. But you've seen how much people need this. They want change. They just need to know that it's real, and that it's going to last." Jamal nodded. "You're right. We have to show them it's different this time." Together, they worked late into the night, making sure every detail was in place. When the day finally came for the community center to reopen, Jamal couldn't wait to see how people would react. The grand opening was a huge success. People from the neighborhood gathered around the newly built community center, excited to see what it would offer. The bright new building stood tall, its windows shining in the sunlight. Inside, the classrooms were filled with computers and books, the walls decorated with colorful artwork. There was a stage for performances, a gym for sports, and a small health clinic where people could see a doctor or nurse. Jamal stood at the front, speaking to the crowd. "This is for all of us," he said, his voice strong and confident. "This is our chance to learn, grow, and build a better future together." We're going to make this work because we're in this together." The crowd cheered, and Jamal felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. This wasn't just a dream anymore. It was real, and it was only the beginning. As the day went on, people began to sign up for the programs, eager to take part in the new opportunities. The excitement was contagious, and Jamal couldn't help but smile. He knew that this was only the start of something much bigger. For the first time, Jamal truly believed that anything was possible. Months passed since the grand opening of the new community center, and things were changing in Jamal's neighborhood. The center was filled with people every day. Kids were attending classes, adults were learning new skills, and families were getting the support they needed. Jamal watched it all happen, his heart swelling with pride. This was what he had always wanted, but seeing it in action was something he would never forget. The scholarship program Robert had promised was also a success. More and more students were applying, and for the first time, they felt like they had a real chance at a future beyond the streets. Jamal had helped guide the program, and seeing kids excited about their studies made him feel like he had done something important. One afternoon, Robert invited Jamal to his office again. This time, Robert's expression was different. He was excited, like he had big news. "Jamal, you've done something amazing here," Robert said. "I've been talking to the local government and other companies, and they want to get involved. People are starting to see the impact the community center is having, and they want to help make it grow." Jamal's eyes widened. "You mean other people want to help too?" "Yes," Robert said with a smile. "They want to add more programs, more scholarships, and even more opportunities for jobs. This is just the beginning. I'm working with some of the biggest companies in the area to create new partnerships for your community." Jamal could hardly believe what he was hearing. It was like the dream was spreading, like the work he had done was inspiring others to give back as well. "This is incredible," Jamal said, his voice filled with awe. "But Mr. Robert, I never thought it would be this big. This isn't just about the community center anymore. It's about giving people real chances to change their lives." "Exactly," Robert agreed. "And none of this would have been possible without you, Jamal. You've shown me that one person can make a difference, but you didn't stop there. You showed your whole neighborhood that they can make a difference too." Jamal felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't used to hearing compliments like this. He had always been just another kid in the neighborhood, but now he was a leader, a real part of the change. As the months went on, Jamal continued to be involved in the community center's growth. He worked with the new programs, helped mentor younger students, and even started a leadership class for kids who wanted to make a difference in their own way. The center was growing, and so was Jamal. He started receiving recognition for his work. Local news stations ran stories about him, and even a few newspapers wrote about how a boy from a small neighborhood had turned his dream into a reality. But through all the attention, Jamal remained humble. He never forgot where he came from, and he always made time to visit his old friends in the neighborhood. One day, as Jamal walked through the now bustling community center, he saw Robert talking to a group of people. Robert waved him over with a smile. "Jamal," he said, "I just wanted to remind you that this is your legacy. This community will never forget what you've done. You changed everything for them. You changed everything for me." Jamal looked around at the kids studying, the parents talking, the laughter in the air. He realized, in that moment, that this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about the future. It was about hope. And it was all because he had the courage to ask for more than just a better life for himself. He had asked for a better life for everyone. Jamal's work was far from over, but as he stood there, watching the community thrive, he knew one thing for sure. This was only the beginning. Years passed, and the community center became a hub of activity. What started as a dream for a better future had transformed into a place where people's lives were changing every day. The scholarships Jamal had helped create allowed dozens of students to go to college, and many of them returned to give back to their community. The programs at the center were thriving, offering everything from career advice to personal growth workshops. Jamal's neighborhood was slowly but surely becoming a place of opportunity instead of struggle. Jamal had grown as well. He had graduated from high school with honors, thanks to the scholarships that had made his education possible. He'd gone on to college, earning a degree in social work, because he wanted to help even more people, especially those from his community. Through it all, Robert had remained by his side, mentoring him, offering guidance, and supporting him in any way he could. Now, standing in front of the crowd at the anniversary celebration of the community center's reopening, Jamal felt a sense of pride like never before. The center was celebrating 5 years of success, and Jamal was asked to speak. It was a moment he had never imagined for himself, but it was a moment he knew he had earned. As he stepped up to the microphone, Jamal looked out at the audience, families, children, local leaders, and friends who had been with him from the very beginning. Robert was sitting in the front row, his face beaming with pride. Jamal took a deep breath before speaking. "I never thought I'd be standing here, talking to all of you today. When I was younger, I could only dream of a place like this, where we could all come together and build something better. But now, looking at everything we've accomplished, I realized that the dream wasn't just mine. It was ours." The crowd was silent, hanging on every word. None of this would have been possible without all of you, your hard work, your belief in this community. But most of all, it wouldn't have happened without the support of one person who showed me that even the smallest actions can lead to big change. Robert, I can't thank you enough for everything you've done, for believing in me and in this neighborhood. Robert smiled, his eyes wet with emotion, but he stood and clapped, proud of Jamal. "I used to think that I had to do everything on my own to make an impact," Jamal continued. "But I've learned that real change happens when we work together. When we support each other and help each other rise, that's when the impossible becomes possible." As Jamal finished speaking, the crowd stood up in applause. It wasn't just for him. It was for the entire community, for everything they had built together. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Jamal stood outside the center, looking up at the building he had once walked past, feeling as though it had always been a part of him. Robert walked up beside him. "You did it, Jamal," Robert said, clapping him on the back. "You've changed everything." Jamal looked at him, a small smile playing at the corner of his lips. "We did it. Together." Robert nodded. "You know, I never imagined this would be where we'd end up. You've done more than I could have ever hoped for. You've changed lives. You've given hope. And that's something that money can never buy." Jamal stood in silence for a moment, taking it all in. His dream had come true, not just for him, but for everyone who had believed in him along the way. He had started with a simple wish to help his community, and now that community had become something stronger, something better. As the night sky stretched above them, Jamal felt the weight of everything he had accomplished, but also the excitement of what was still to come. He knew that this was just one chapter in a much bigger story, and that his journey was far from over. The community had changed, Jamal had changed, and together they had built something that would last for generations to come.